Om Namasri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we were discussing the ninth sutra of the second chapter. Swarasavahi Vidusho Api Tatharudo Abhinivesha. So the fifth, this I'm discussing this in great detail because this is the main existential problem which results in dukkha, the fear of death or the clinging to life. So the literal translation, as we saw last time, that klesha, the fifth klesha, which is based on the ever-flowing momentum of its own samskaras. Swarasavahi means it is not something that is induced. Though we see death outside, we don't require a previous experience of, everybody knows that, or as Yudhishthira said, we see death every day, but still we have a feeling that we will go on to live eternally. So, though the feeling of death now and then props up in our mind, we somehow push it under the carpet. We just don't want to think about it. We don't confront it, that it is one of the inevitable things that is going to happen in our life. So that klesha, which is klesha means a pain-bearing obstruction. Why is abhinivesha called as a pain-bearing obstruction? Because it causes some kind of anxiety and pain. Nobody is happy with the thought of, or even with the idea that one should think about death. So the klesha, and why is it worrisome? Because according to Patanjali, it is based on the ever-flowing momentum of its own samskaras, that it even, which is deep-rooted in the minds of even learned people. Vidusho api, it is known, this particular pain-bearing obstruction is known as the will to live or clinging to life. So abhinivesha normally means some kind of passionate attachment to the body. So according to Vyasa, who is one of the commentators of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it also means, abhinivesha means marana trasa, means fear of death. This fear manifests itself in all beings. We see that. It as a constant feeling that may I not cease to live, but let me always be alive. Let me always be. To exist is a fundamental existential desire in every human being, in every creature. So, this feeling is known as the will to live. Atma Shihi. Atma Shihi means the desire to live, the will to live or clinging to life. This is an instinct of self-preservation. You don't have to see experience, like unlike other samskaras, which require some kind of experience which gives rise to certain reflex actions and you react. Most of the klesha like raga and dvesha, we normally have to come across these objects, like the things that we like, which attaches us to those objects. We like certain things, we like sweets, we like all the different objects. So there is a tendency in us to go after that, to eat those sweets, or maybe to eat certain things or enjoy certain things. But that is as a result of perception. Whereas here, the will to live is not something which is experienced every day. We do not have to be told. Even the youngest, even one of the crudest creature living on this earth has this instinct of self-preservation. Nobody wants to die. Nobody wants it. The will to live is there, so dominant. That is why Patanjali says, Swarasavahi, it is ever-flowing momentum because of the old samskaras. And that is how past life comes. It's through past life experience that we have. It cannot be derived through pratyaksha, anumana or agama. That is, there are three valid reasons why people react in certain ways. One is pratyaksha, that you see a rope, and then you make an anumana. Either you see it. If you see a snake, you are afraid of the snake. You react. You dislike snakes. You are afraid of snakes. You don't want to encounter them. But sometimes you react by way of anumana, not pratyaksha. Anumana is something that you infer from what you see. You have seen a rope in the dark and imagine, you superimpose the snake quality on that rope and you believe that it is a snake, though it is not really a snake. So the anumana, inference, or maybe past agama, that is the shastras, the uh, the different ideas that are given to us by the previous experience of sages, rishis, and all that is known as agama. So at least in this birth, we don't need conclusive proof. What Patanjali wants to say is the creatures and all, they don't have their samskaras are these deep-rooted samskaras. To that instinct of self-preservation is so deep-rooted that unlike this raga and dvesha, which can be acquired in the present birth, ragas, for example, our attachment to certain things are acquired in this birth. A child is not perhaps born with the tastes that he develops when he grows up. He is exposed to certain things, he likes certain things, he hates certain things, and then raga and dvesha is produced. So unlike raga and dvesha, that is hatred towards things that you don't like, abhinivesha is always produced by samskaras derived from previous lives. So that is why we are born. The child itself, before it is born, it is struggling to breathe. That is why it is cries. It just wants to survive. It doesn't want to die. Even the young one of the duck, when it takes to water, it starts to sink, but suddenly that self-preservative instinct helps that duckling to just flap its wings and stay afloat on water. It doesn't want to die. No creature, there is no samskara. It's just, if you think that all the samskaras are required in this life, then where does the ducks get their samskaras? They are from the previous life, the previous experiences. The abhinivesha is unlike raga and dvesha, which is produced by the strong likes and dislikes that you have in this life, attachment to the things that you like, and hatred or some kind of repulsion towards things that you don't like. We call it dvesha in Sanskrit. So this raga and dvesha are a result of most of the experiences are acquired in this birth. Of course, there are some samskaras which you might carry, and you might have an inherent allergy towards certain things and inherent liking towards certain things. That is different. But most of the raga and dvesha, the raga and dvesha that we experience in our day-to-day life, is something which we inherit, which we derive, okay, which is acquired in this present birth. Most of the raga and dvesha, likes and dislikes. Whereas abhinivesha is a klesha which is produced by something that which we have brought forward. Every creature, every living being wants to survive. That survival instinct is something which we inherit right from birth. Even before birth, that feeling is there. Every child wants to survive. Every newly born creature wants to survive. So raga and dvesha, you can trace, they have a definite cause. So you can solve it. You know what is causing your attachment to certain things. You either avoid that, or you see that you don't expose yourself to this. If you know that you have a weakness for cigarettes or some smoking, then you just ensure that you don't. It can be prevented by ensuring that those objects are, you are not exposed to those objects. So you don't feel like, don't have a raga towards that. So raga, dvesha, they have a definite cause. And once you remove that cause, the raga and dvesha, the klesha, the two kleshas, raga and dvesha, don't impact you. They don't create any problems. There are ways where you can see that you are not surrounded by the things that you like, and you are not also avoid certain things which you don't like. So raga and dvesha don't affect you, affect your mind. Whereas Abhinivesha has no known cause in the present life. We have not experienced death to know that death is harmful. So Boja says that it is not possible. Boja is another commentator. He says it has to come from previous lives. That is why they say it is an existential problem, the problem which threatens our very existence. So that is why it is given such a great importance. The fear of death. That is the root cause of all our fears. So raga and dvesha, if you notice, comes now and then. At certain times it comes, whereas abhinivesha is an ever-present feeling. You don't say that you lose fear of dying for some time. It never happens. That constant fear, either it can be eradicated by sadhana, or it does not come and go. So that nobody needs to tell you. You don't need to be exposed to death to fear death. It is coming. It is an ever-present feeling within, that fear of death. So it is to convey all these ideas that Patanjali says, Swarasavahi, it is flowing on its own. It does not require an impetus or stimulation uh, uh, to feel it. It is an ever-present feeling. You don't want any stimulus. It's not, no doubt when you see death around you, you suddenly remember that we are also going to die one day. When you see sick people, but Yudhishthira says, is it not strange that we are seeing people die in front of us, either on television or some social media or reading through books, and also through our personal experience, seeing our near and dear ones die. But still, we don't give it a thought. It is underlying, it is ever-present feeling underneath the surface of our mind, which is causing us other fears. It's not the fear of death alone. It's the fear of death that manifests as fear of losing money, fear of losing security. They are all born out of the fear of death. The fear of death is flowing underneath as a river which is underground. We can't see the water, but it is Swarasava, it is ever flowing, that ever flow. That is why Patanjali says it is Swarasavahi. So it is one of the mysteries of our life. And nobody can claim that he has solved it unless he is realized, unless he has conquered death, as Yama says to Nachiketa. I'll show you the path. By realizing the Atman or the Brahman alone, one can get rid of this fear of death. So Yudhishthira also says, what can be a greater mystery than this, that every day in the world, living beings go to the abode of Yama, and yet all others hope to have permanence of existence. So that mixed feeling. On one side, you have the fear of death. On one side, you are yearning for permanence of existence. You want to exist. That Sat aspect of Brahman. We always want to exist. It's our very nature. Nobody wants not to exist. He thinks mistakenly that when he dies, he will not exist. But yes, even beyond that, existence has been proved. That is what Nachiketa is asking Yama. He's asking Yama, what happens after death? Do I continue to live, or do I vanish like the smoke? When the substance is burnt, the smoke also vanishes. Smoke doesn't persist. So does it happen like that? Do I just exist, continue, or with death everything ends? So then the answer to that question is given by Yama through all the verses of the Upanishads. So the stock of how does this happen? So they say many explanations are given by the commentators like Mani Prabha. Then we have Vijnana Bhikshu. There are many commentaries. It's not just Vyasa and Bhoja who wrote commentaries on the sutras. Sutras are very terse and brief. So they need some kind of explanation or commentary. The first two commentaries, popular commentaries which Swami Vivekananda referred in his Rajoga are, he seems to have got hold of Vyasa Bhashya, the Sanskrit commentary by Vyasa. We do not know which Vyasa. There are so many Vyasas. Everybody was called a Vyasa. Whoever wrote anything, if he wanted to hide his name or not disclose his name, he would use a title Vyasa. So it may not be the same Vyasa who wrote Valmiki's Ramayana, or it may be the same. We do not know. But anyway, they were not bothered who was the author. They did not want publicity. So they just said, they wrote commentaries and gave it for the benefit of all humanity. They didn't want their authorship to be acknowledged. They were not bothered about, so they used to, many times hiding their true name, they used to say Vyasa. But there are others who wrote in their own name. Maniprabha was one such scholar. Vijnana Bhikshu was another scholar. They lived in different ages and they gave different interpretations to these sutras. So Maniprabha, who wrote a commentary on the Vyasa Sutra, this particular sutra, he says the stock of vasanas born of the painful experience of death in several past lives, that is the samskaras. Samskaras he calls the stock of vasana. Vasana means that desire, that stock, which is born out of painful experience of death in several past lives. Every time we have died, which is one of the most painful experiences, the moment of death and the death itself. Sometimes it is prolonged, sometimes it is sudden. So, but in any case, it comes as a shock. Suddenly you see that your gross body doesn't exist. So it takes some time for the mind to accept the fact that you don't no longer exist in the physical body, but you continue to exist in the spiritual body. So samskaras are continued to be formed. Till you are born again, you just again temporarily forget it, but that fear of death continues. It continues when you are out of your body, when after death, when you are in the subtle body, and it continues swarasavahi, it flows endlessly, this fear. Because of the reason is, Vijnana Bhikshu says, it is the painful experiences of the death in several past lives, which have born, which vasanas, these vasanas have become samskaras. Vasanas are desire not to die. Everybody has a desire not to die, I should not die. But then you die, and when you die, that there is a very painful experience. You did not want to die, but you still died. At least you gave up the gross body. So the mind does not accept it. And when it is shocked, sometimes it is shocked, sometimes if the person has become wise and he knows this is the inevitable, perhaps he does not fear death, but that one has to conquer that feeling. This klesha has to be conquered. That is why Patanjali is explaining this sutra, saying, though it is coming with us, swarasena, by its own essence, it is flowing with us in every birth after birth after birth. But then at some stage we have to say that, why carry this samskara, why carry this fear? In one life it is okay, in 10 lives it's okay, but year after, life after life we are carrying this. So at some stage, like Nachiketa, we get disgusted. We want some explanation and we want to be immortal. We say we don't want to die again and again experience the same pain of death. Why not conquer death so that we don't die, we become immortal? So that search for immortality is what is known as spirituality. Religion began from this search for immortality. Whether that idea of immortality is compared to heaven, where you will be eternally living happily, or whether you believe in moksha or nirvana, different religions give different ideas of the eternal life, that life which is immortal. Amrutasya putra, we are children of immortality, but we don't know it. That's why because we don't know it, because of this klesha. This particular klesha, which affects even the minds of the learned. It's not just ignorant people are afraid of death. Even the learned are afraid of death. There's not a single person who is not afraid of death. The only person who is not afraid of death is one who has realized that he is immortal. But that is very rare. Among thousands, Sri Krishna says, some take to religion, and among those thousands, only a few realize the truth. Others may read religion, read religious books, and also may try to remove the klesha, but that fear of death does not go easily. It requires a lot of spiritual practice. It requires constantly telling yourself that you are immortal, you are the children of immortal bliss. Why should we be sad? It's constantly asserting that fact. One gets deeply rooted in this idea, in the consciousness that one is immortal. So it has to be acquired. It's not a thing that can come all of a sudden, or it comes in one life. Sometimes, because the samskaras of death have been acquired through several lives, it will not sometimes be possible to get rid of this feeling in one life. So anyway, Vyasa says, even in the minds of learned people, it is deeply rooted. There is another commentator who is known as Vachaspati Mishra. He has also written a commentary. He says, when you say this Abhinivesha is deeply rooted, it is Swarasava, he is explaining that the Vidwan, when you say Vidwan, he says there are two types of knowledge. Which Vidwan is afraid of death? One who has acquired ordinary discrimination, not the Vidwan who is well versed in the essence of the scriptures. A Vidwan who has understood the true import of the scriptures is not what is meant here. Vidusho, the Vidusho or the wise man here, is one who has acquired some kind of discrimination. He is intelligent, he is wise. And he thinks he has understood the scriptures because he has heard, he has read, he is a very great student and he has understood the scriptures. And he thinks he has understood, and he is confident also that I have read the Gita, I have read this Upanishad, I am reading for 40 years. Some people claim that. But that doesn't mean that he has attained real wisdom or higher illumination. So he's saying the wise people here does not mean the really wise who have realized the Brahman, who have attained intuitive illumination. They are different. Otherwise, even if those Vidwans, if Vidwan means scholars or great Gyanis who have realized the Atman, then what is the use? Even if they have fear, they don't have this fear. Only those who have acquired ordinary discrimination through a theoretical study of the scriptures, they are not convinced. It has not become a Shraddha in their life. They just read the scriptures. They know almost everything. They can speak about everything. They can hear about it. They have heard about everything that the scripture has to tell. In fact, their knowledge may be wonderful. But the discrimination which they acquired may not be sufficient to remove the doubts, remove the or get them higher illumination. So here the word ruda means one which is deeply rooted. Vachaspati, then he says this, the chief, one famous commentator who's known by the name Hariharananda Aranya. He is a Bengali commentator. He wrote in Bengali, but he was a great yogi. So this Hariharananda says, fear of death may be the chief abhinivesha. But he says all other kinds of fear are also abhinivesha. Because we do not know, it is somehow connected to this fear of death. Why do you fear that you will lose money? And then because if you lose money, you think that you may not be able to survive. So ultimately, it is the fear of death which manifests itself as fear of losing money, fear of losing name, fear of losing fame, and you will be neglected, or maybe you will not be able to get all the advantages, and you think they are all necessary to survive. So fear of death is the chief fear, but all other fears are also abhinivesha. So abhinivesha is not just the fear of death or clinging to life, but all the fears that are associated with this primal fear or existential fear. So fear, after stating the nature of all the five kleshas, the next sutra, we are coming to that. We have discussed a lot about these kleshas. Now, 10th and 11th sutra, which we are going to discuss now, they discuss how once we recognize, first step is to recognize the five kleshas. What are the five kleshas? To repeat, avidya, asmita. Avidya means ignorance, ignorance of the true nature of our own personality, of our life, our destiny, any kind. All these things are ignorance, avidya. Doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, or even at the right time doing the wrong thing, that is the result of avidya. Then we have asmita, that ego, that sense of ego that makes us cling to the non-self. Ego normally is a product of the material universe, of Prakriti. That is why wherever the ego goes, that I am a rich man, I am a poor man, this ego never goes. In some form or the other, the ego is there. Even the ego that I am a yogi, I am a great man, unless you are really a yogi in the true sense, where you have realized the highest, then you are a yogi. Otherwise, because you practice yoga, because you have a wonderful understanding of yoga, you have attended so many classes, done this, done that, one doesn't become a yogi. So, these kleshas have to be destroyed. Avidya, asmita, ego, raga, which we discussed in great detail, attachment for the things that you like, dvesha, hatred for the things that you don't like. So likes and dislikes. A person who has very strong likes and dislikes is far away from the practice of yoga. He should not be ever saying that I like this. Strong liking for certain things, strong hatred, and people make such a big fuss. Oh, I don't like this. Who cares that we don't like certain things? Prakriti doesn't care for us. And some people, because they can afford to like certain things, they will say, no, I like only these things. But nature doesn't bother. Someday or the other, it will show us that these likes and dislikes are harmful. As long as you get what you like and as long as you can avoid what you don't like, you are happy. But nature is not like that. Nature has a, by itself, nature, uh, now and then it will give you things that you don't like. And now and then it will not give you things that you like. So that is where the conflict starts. And that is where the problem starts. Raga, dvesha controls a human mind and makes him suffer, makes him cry, makes him suffer pain because of his own decision to like certain things and to hate certain things. When you are a very choosy person, when people are very choosy, oh, I like this, you'll see those persons will always be talking with full of ego that I don't like this, I like this. Now, what do you mean? Nature will not always supply you with things that you like. You may, for some part of your life, you may get things whatever you like, especially when your parents are earning, the children are very happy. They just have to demand, and if the parents are uh, uh, capable, they will supply you with whatever you want. But a stage comes when you grow, when you know that you like these things, but you can't perhaps afford it. When somebody else was paying it, you could afford it, you got the things that you like. But these things do not persist. Nature has its own laws. Many times nature will say, why should you always take the things that you have to have a neutral attitude? Take whatever is given to you. That is why Holy Mother used to say in the Gospel that contentment is such a great virtue. We don't understand that it is so difficult, it is almost impossible for a person to be full of contentment. That is why Holy Mother said it is not such an easy task. As long as you have these kleshas, as long as you have likes and dislikes, you will never be content. Nothing will make you content. So these kleshas, they function in a gross way. Now Patanjali divides and says in the 10 sutras, he says, Te prati prasava heyaha sukshma. Now the kleshas are of two types. Now these are causing us problems. Raga, dvesha, abhinivasha, fear, which is the biggest among all the kleshas. Along with avidya. Avidya gives rise to asmita, ego. Ego gives rise to these further three. But among all these, the fear of death or the existential fear, the instinct to always survive, these are deep rooted. They are very difficult to remove. But still, if Patanjali says these kleshas are there, but why should you be dominated by these kleshas? Why can't you solve it? Why can't you get rid of avidya? Why can't you get rid of asmita? Why can't you get rid of raga? Why can't you get rid of dvesha? Or why can't you just assert yourself and say that I don't fear death? Try to conquer that fear of death. So how to do it? That is the question. So 10th and 11th verse will explain to us how to do it. So there are two types of eradication of these kleshas. Kleshas have to be eradicated. One is a gross way and another is a subtle way. So te prati prasava heya sukshmaha. So subtle form, he begins with the subtle form. Actually, the problems are created by our subtle desires. Gross desires are not so important. We may have a desire, but then we just give it up. But if there are subtle desires lingering, we do not even know, and we are surprised that these desires come out in the open. So we have to deal with the sukshma first. So the meaning of this verse, te prati prasava heyaha, the subtle form of kleshas, sukshmaha, the subtle form of kleshas, all the 5 kleshas, are to be eradicated through counter evolution. I mean, you have to impose a counter feeling. Suppose you like certain things and you are desperate. When you see it, you just want to grab it. You just want to enjoy it. Tell your mind, create a counter feeling. No, just because you see these things, you should not run. Restrain yourself. Control yourself. This is not good for you. The moment you see certain things, you run after it. That is not a good sign. So these kleshas in a subtle form, they make you run towards it, make you run towards the things that you like, but also make you run away from things that you don't like. Even that has to be stopped. Somehow you have to just accept whatever comes. They may not be very pleasurable or pleasant, but even then you have to say that I should not have these strong likes and dislikes. If certain things which I used to dislike, I have to train my mind by countering that feeling by saying that it is painful, but I will bear it. It is painful, it is dvesha, I hate to get that. But since it has come of its own accord, I will somehow tolerate it and somehow try to live with that problem. So that is how you counter dvesha. Raga can be countered by having an opposite feeling. So that is why they say they have to be eradicated with counter evolution. How? So most of these kleshas, Patanjali says, they become vrittis. Before they become thought, there is a subtle state where they exist. But before they become vrittis, they are gross. They are in the sthula avastha. But if they become vrittis, they are sthula. Sorry, they are the gross. But before that, they are sukshma. So when you see certain things, there is a subtle desire. Say you like smoking. You see the cigarette. It is still gross. The desire, the klesha is gross. Oh, I like cigarette, I should go and smoke. But you still don't go. The thought has come, but they are in a subtle form. But the moment the rittis become very definitive, it becomes a definite ritti, then you can't stop. So that is not sukshma, that is sthula. When the kleshas lie hidden in a subtle way, they are tempting you, then they are sukshma or subtle. But when they manifest themselves as a strong desire to smoke, when you finally say that the vritti is so strong that I have to, now there is no other alternative. I like to smoke, so I will smoke. I like to eat, so I will eat. So that kind of vritti is a gross vritti. But Bhoja says the sukshma has a serious drawback, that it would make the burning of sanskara to higher illumination unnecessary. I mean, very difficult. Because you can burn, you can say, assert yourself and say that I am not going to succumb to this vritti, the vritti or the wave of the mind which tells me, no, 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 go and enjoy it. But I say, no, I have a counter evolution. I have a counter thought. And in a gross way, I can deal. But what will happen when you have to attack it not when it becomes a vritti. Bhoja's interpretation says that finally we'll say that it is when you have a higher illumination, then you don't care for these likes and dislikes. You become very peaceful like Holy Mother. She was always content. If certain things happened the way she wanted, she was happy. If it doesn't happen, she was happy. Her mind was absolutely like that of a yogi, totally undisturbed by the samskaras, because the samskaras she had burnt. This pratiprasava heyaha sukshma. The sukshma have to be countered even before they become sthula or become vrittis by kriya yoga. By kriya yoga will help you to weaken it, but they cannot destroy it. So how can you destroy it? That is the answer which is given in this sutra. So you have to not only counter it, countering may be possible at a lower level, self-control, but to remove that sukshma, remove that subtle desire which you don't even know, unless that desire is expressed, it comes as a vritti, you don't understand the danger. So how to deal with this sukshma before it becomes sthula? So you have to burn it. The only way is through spiritual practices. Kriya yoga will help you to attenuate it. I mean, make it less effective. But to totally remove it, it is the power of prajna, the light of consciousness that is created through japa. Through japa sadhana, we go on creating this light of knowledge. This avidya is destroyed. We target avidya, which gives rise to the kleshas. We don't to solve the deeper issues in our life, the mantra shastra or the spiritual practices which enlighten our prajna, the light of prajna can burn these seeds. These samskaras which are gross you can handle. But what about the subtle? That is what is discussed here. To eradicate the subtle kleshas, you have to resort to higher forms of spiritual practices like japa, repetition of the holy name, till the light of prajna shines very, very brightly. It's not a physical shining. It's a wonderful source of knowledge. When you are in that state, you don't feel tempted at all because the samskaras have gone. You don't control the vrittis. You don't even have to make any efforts. But when it is at a sthula state, when the strong likes and dislikes trouble you, when the fear of life or fear of death troubles you, then you run here and there and try to solve the problem. But when by the light of prajna, you remove the avidya itself, then you will see all the other kleshas, they're simply burnt. So what burns them, what ensures that they don't pop up and disturb you and cause this pain-bearing obstruction, it is the light of prajna. That is why the very essence of Gayatri Mantra, the very essence of all the mantras, especially when it is received from a qualified tradition or a tradition of gurus, because the power to burn the samskaras comes if the bija, if the mantra, everything is charged with some kind of consciousness, the consciousness of the original discoverer, or you may say the original experiencer of these mantras. He has handed it over to his disciple. It comes down in a tradition. It comes with the power associated, the power to clear the dark ignorance which is in our heart. It's not just the light, but it's the light of wisdom, the light of intense discrimination, which tells you as clearly as broad daylight what is right, what is wrong. That discrimination which can distinguish between real and unreal, which makes our life where we never take a wrong step. As Sri Ramakrishna said, a person who is totally wise, he will never take a wrong step. He will never commit errors. Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of a dancer. A perfect dancer will never have a false step. The steps will be rhythmical, and that practice, or that kind of spiritual practice that we do, will ensure that we will not succumb, and whatever little samskaras are there, they will be burnt. Maybe it will happen gradually, because otherwise the samskaras may be so deep rooted, so much unknown to us. They may be in subtle form. So that's why here, when you talk of sukshma, they are something which can be destroyed only through higher spiritual practice. Whereas the Kriya Yoga, which we were discussed, the Karma Yoga or the other yogas, doing good, doing pujas and all those things, they are fine. They will help us to control the gross desires. And the gross problems will be solved to some extent. But the deeper can be burnt, the deeper samskaras have to be burnt only through the light of prajna, which one generates when one does spiritual sadhana. It need not be just mantra. It can be prayers. It can be bhakti. It can be other yogas, Raj Yoga, concentration on. There are many ways. I'm not saying that it is only through japa they can be burnt. But the technique of japa was one of the methods which comes in the tradition of Guru Parampara, where you inherit this mantra surcharged with power. It enables us, it quickens the process. Not that it is essential. Some people ask whether the sadhana is essential. Yes, sadhana in some form is essential. It need not be just mantra sadhana or repeating the japa, meditating on the ishta. These things may be peculiar or may be specific to certain traditions, but they are not part of every tradition. There are other ways of creating this light of prajna, creating this wisdom which can destroy the samskaras. So these problems are to be handled in this way. So now we have to find that the fire of spiritual illumination, it is known as, by technical word, prasankhana. Prasankhana means it is such a powerful fire that it literally roasts the samskaras. It heats to a certain extent, it roasts, but it does not burn it to powder. You see, some roasted seeds, for example, they have a tendency. Dried seeds, of course, you can plant, they will give rise to plants or trees. Dried, even if they have been dried for hundreds of years, it is lying somewhere. Moment it gets some water, it will illuminate. So seeds are always dried. Nobody plants a raw seed, a green seed. But this kind of Kriya Yoga, or dealing with the gross samskaras, will destroy the seed. They will roast them, but it will not destroy them. That is according to Vijnana Bhikshu, who says it may be true that you may heat because of your sadhana. A little of the seeds may be heated, and you may think that you have conquered these desires. But the moment it gets water, the moment it gets an opportunity, these dried seeds or the semi-roasted seeds also illuminate, also grow. They cause samskaras, they cause vrittis, they cause problems. So what to do? You have to not only roast, but you have to burn them. Burn them. Once they are burned to powder, they are reduced to ashes. then the seeds are of no value. You can't take the burnt ashes and expect the tree to grow. So that is what he's saying, that an advanced yogi, according to the commentators, can sometimes they can reactivate even the roasted seeds by their powerful willpower. He suddenly decides that I have to do this. Some of the yogis, for the benefit of the world, though they have destroyed all their samskaras, for the out of compassion, they come down and they try to help other people. So they have their seeds of their karma has been destroyed. But for the welfare of humanity, they are illumined yogis. They say, okay, let us for for the for the sake of other people, we have to lower ourselves, lower our minds, cause these vrittis and show them, to explain to them what is the harm in not controlling these kleshas. So they voluntarily, even if the seeds are roasted, they just experiment with that and show that, see, even I have these samskaras. Sri Ramakrishna also showed many. He said, I have pain, I have this, that. He was behaving like a ordinary human being because he had recreated or he reactivated those old samskaras, which were not existing in the first place. They were all realized incarnations, there's no question. But the power of the mind or power of the yogi can act in a reverse way. It can, even the roasted samskaras, which would never grow into a plant, they can be, by the willpower or the water and the other facilities, you somehow can make those dagda bija, those burnt seeds or the roasted seeds alive. So that is a technique only possible to the highest yogis and illumined yogi. That is why Swami Vivekananda Ramakrishna told Swami Vivekananda, I know all your samskaras, you have got the illumination, but the key is with me. I've given you that realization, but you'll get it back when you do my work. And to do my work, I'm putting those samskaras of fear, of anger. That's why you see the Swami Vivekananda in many cases, though he was always free. He was always free, but he acted as if he had this anger. He was in a hurry, he was discontent, he was angry. Many things that you see, these are roasted seeds, kleshas, again by the willpower of the yogi, for some reason, for the benefit of the world, to show the world how you deal with the samskaras, they reactivate it. It is known as reactivation. That is one idea. So there are so many ways. We will discuss it in our future classes also, that there are many ways of dealing with the sthula kleshas and sukshma kleshas. That is, these two sutras will take some time. We may have to conduct many classes to understand, because this is the essence. We took so much time to understand what are the 5 basic problems, the 5 kleshas, how they cause issues in our life. We can trace to all these 5 kleshas, trace all our gross and subtle problems to these 5 kleshas. But after having traced and found that, oh, I am a victim of raga, I am a victim of excess attachment, I am a victim of excess hatred towards certain things, and I suffer because of that, or I may have an excess attachment to my body, I always fear death. So all these things, having recognized the 5 kleshas, we have to understand how to deal. These kleshas come in, they are not very gross. They are not thoughts, they are not samskara, manifest samskaras. They are still in a hidden form. Part of it is hidden, and no matter how much you try, they will take a long time to burn. When it is totally burnt, then you have nirvana. Then that is the last stage. So we will come to it in some other class. Now let me see, there are 2 questions. So Swamiji, let us say, if the goal is not achieved in this life, then is it possible to do upasana after death in the subtle body and realize the goal? So then there is no need for the body. Yes, if there are instances There are instances where you see one Swami Turiyananji was passing in under a tree in Vrindavan. He saw many great Vaishnava saints who had almost got realization, but some desires made them cling, some subtle desires. They didn't get a gross body, but some subtle desires made them stay in the spiritual, the Sukshma Sharira. So in common parlance, it is known as ghosts. Though many of us just think ghosts is an imaginary thing. But for people who can see the Sthula and perceive the Sukshma, for them these ghosts are very common. So he could see those souls, struggling souls. They said, we have been doing sadhana in Vrindavan for such a long time. And unfortunately, we passed away. We died before we could realize the highest. So our minds are not keen to get back into the world. So most of the spirits, or some of the spirits who had reached to a very high level, unless you reach such a high level, otherwise you have to take up a body. Sometimes you take up a body for different reasons. Maybe you have a mission to fulfill. All the Leela companions of Thakur Ma Swamiji, they were almost Jivan Mukta, Nitya Mukta souls. They came they took the body. So taking the body is not so painful. If one is realized, the body is insignificant, whether you are born in the body or you are not. But as you have asked this question, yes, we can complete the sadhana, but in most of the cases, one is born. And he continues this sadhana. That's why Gita says, Shruti, you will be born, I forgot that verse, in the house of wealthy people, or maybe wealthy and good people, with not only wealthy but noble, so that he doesn't have to struggle for life, or in the house of rishis, or in the house of yogis, yoginam, in the houses of yogi, the departed soul will be born. He will be waiting to be born so that he can continue sadhana. Very often, or most often, one has to take up the body because it really doesn't matter. Why should these Vaishnavas, perhaps they were not at all. So they told Turiyananji that please pray for us, release us from bondage. We have been struggling here. We don't want to be born. We just want to proceed further from that state. So we have been doing sadhana. But they say that human birth is rare. Perhaps the speed with which we can do sadhana increases if we are born again. So that is why most of the Shastras say that Manushya Janma is very important. And we have to consider, otherwise we would have been in the spirit world. We would not have been born. Because the Lord wants us to do sadhana quickly and try to attain whatever we can in this life. Before we die, before we give up the physical body, this body has been given. So it's nothing wrong. There's no harm. In fact, it might be a bit difficult to work out the gross karma in a subtle body. We can do sadhana, but it will just help us postpone our journey, and maybe at some stage we may born and quickly finish the little karma that is there and attain God. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, this is his last birth. I mean, you have to be born to even reach that state which is the last birth. So that has happened in many cases, and so that is the idea. Okay, so yeah, Yoga Brashta. Yoga Brashta is explained in the Srimatam Gehe, Shrutinam Srimatam Gehe, Yoga Brashta, Atva Yoginam Eva, in the family of Srimatam. Srimatam means not necessarily wealthy. It means a noble house. A house which has lot of noble members of the family who will allow you to follow the spiritual path, like Balram Bose. You can be born in a noble family, or you will be born in a family of yogis, which is much better. so that you have an advantage and you continue your sadhana. So these are yoga brashtas, those who have not attained to the state of yoga before dying, before giving up this body. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.